They're back and they're as noisy as ever. It's the vacation season on eastern Long Island, and helicopters, noisy helicopters, come in and out in large numbers, flying very low, and lots of people are very upset. Bill Riley, how does the helicopter traffic affect you?
It affects us because you can't sit out here on the deck on Friday afternoon or on Sunday afternoon. Sometimes it's even Thursday and Monday morning because they are too low and too noisy. And what they wind up doing is shaking the glasses, and if you're having a conversation, you have to end it immediately.
Now, you're here in Noyac. This traffic involves the East Hampton Airport.
Yes, it's the East Hampton Airport, and it's the helicopters who are powering up to get to their proper altitude so that they can get back to the city in a hurry. So what we get is the maximum amount of noise that they can generate simply because they're trying to get their maximum power to get to the right altitude. They're supposed to be at a minimum of 2,500 feet before they leave the airport. That's rarely the case.
What kind of frequency are we talking about? Every how many minutes?
Sometimes there's 2 a minute. That's not all the time, but that certainly happens occasionally. And usually it's every 6 or 7 minutes for 3 or 4 hours at a time.
Wow, that really affects you. Has to affect your life. I mean, it must shake the house and shake.
It definitely, well, it shakes the house, it shakes the windows, it shakes, you can feel the vibrations are in the air. It's a, if you have the air conditioner on inside and you've got a central air conditioner, which most people around here don't, but if you do, you don't notice it as much. But if you're outside, you are well aware of what's going on, and you are well aware of the constant traffic.
Over the winter, various politicians, Senator Schumer, Congressman Bishop, got involved, and there was an agreement with the helicopter pilots and so forth, and things would be better. Are they better?
It's possible that they're marginally better, but they're not significantly better. The problem is they are dealing with their constituency. Now, by they, I mean the helicopter pilots are dealing with their constituency who are sitting behind them in the helicopter. They want to get back to the city in a hurry. They've paid a tremendous amount of money to make that flight back, and they want to make it as quickly as possible. So what they are doing is listening to their paying customers, and they are flying back as quickly as possible to the city. As I said, they are supposed to rise, and I'm sure Jim Brundage has mentioned this to you, they are supposed to be to a minimum of 2,500 feet over the airport, and then they are supposed to head out. That, as I said, that does happen occasionally, and when you see them, those helicopters are significantly higher. You can still hear them, but they are not the bone-rattling things that wind up coming across most of the time as the pilots angle to get their height. They wind up getting their height of 2,500 feet mainly over Peconic Bay, not over Noyac and North Sea.
Jim Brundage is the manager of the East Hampton Airport. I wonder how cooperative he and other town officials have been with you. For example, the master plan for the airport has this passage where it talks about the least noisy route. It would be coming in from the ocean over Georgica, and boom, you're right into the field. But right. The master plan then talks about the high real estate values of that strip, and I mean, wow, what's the problem here? Wonder how sensitive you feel Brundage and the others have been to you.
One of the things that Jim Brundage wound up doing was opening up that route about 2 years ago. In addition, about 3 years ago, we used to get the traffic going in and out of East Hampton Airport. This used to be the route. What Jim Brundage wound up doing was altering the route so that they would go out across Peconic Bay, crossing North Haven, and then down Northwest Creek. That's the first thing that he wound up doing, was opening up making that the entrance route. This then became the exit route only. The reason they did that was because they almost had an accident about two years ago. They almost had two helicopters that reportedly were within 3 seconds of each other. And one of the pilots saw the other and pulled up. with that, they opened the Northwest Creek route, if we can use that terminology. They also, at the same time, opened up we can call it the Georgia Capon route. There's another name for it that they sometimes call the sand pit route, because it goes over the sand pit before it goes over Georgia Capon. That route reportedly takes about 25% of the helicopters that are coming to and from New York City. There have been very, very few complaints on that route. Now that certainly, the south of the highway is certainly the high rent district. They might have their air conditioners on all the time, and they might not spend as much time outside as we do up here. But most of the people in the Noyak North Sea area have complained. Most of the complaints that have come into the airport have come from Southampton. They have not come from East Hampton, because the helicopters mainly are flying this route. There have been almost no complaints at all coming from the southern route, if you will, the route out to the ocean.
What do you think needs to be done?
The simple answer would be to get them to have all of the helicopter pilots cooperate, and number one, fly the ocean route. That, I think, would be the first thing. Secondly, even before they flew the ocean route, if they got to 3,500 feet, that would make a significant difference, because the noise level of that additional 1,000 feet is the reduced noise level when they get to that additional height is significantly better.
Dorothy Frankel, your home is under the path of these helicopters too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, right here on Noyak Road.
Has it gotten any, I mean, the claim was this year, 2008, the helicopters would be good aerial neighbors, fly very, is the noise any less?
No, no. And you know what? Just last weekend they flew so low, literally right over my house, one after another. Then others were higher in the sky. But still, when they came down like that, it was unbearable. It was unbearable, yeah.
Now, you're from New York. Do you have sympathy
No.
with people from New York who want to avoid the LIE?
I do. I have sympathy. I would like to do it too. But I can't do it because I'm opposed to it. So I can't do it. But yes, I like that idea too. Yeah. But the noise is horrible. And for all of us who were from the city and we moved out here, it was for the quiet and a calm and an ease. And I live here on Noyak Road. And the cars are speeding and speeding. And it's the same city mentality, 50 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And this is residential. And people cannot get out of their driveways, can't get to their mail, and they're in jeopardy every day.
So you're getting it from the road, you're getting it from the sky.
Absolutely.
What do you think could be done?
I don't think it's very complicated. I think you start zoning that the helicopters have to go a different route over the water and not over residents. You make sure you put up speed bumps so it's very clear 30 miles an hour means 30 miles an hour. And then you don't need police to come and give tickets. Everybody starts getting into this groove. You're coming to the Hamptons. We came for the calm. We're here for the calm and the quiet and not this hustle bustle. It's too much. This is not how we want to live, and we pay taxes here.
Gene Polito, you've been monitoring this helicopter situation on the South Fork. Is it any better this year in 2008?
Not yet. Not yet. It's a strictly voluntary program, as you're probably well aware. There's no legal way to control it, so they ask the pilots to voluntarily abide by, certain altitudes and flight paths and so forth, and they're not really doing it. They're not really doing it. So I don't see an improvement. I really don't.
How does it affect your life?
Oh, it's terrible. That's why I did it. I produced a 33-minute video on this whole thing, which I'm distributing to the different civic associations and trying to get more public, open response to it. And it's being very well received so far. And that's prompted me to do it. It's just terrible imposition on quality of life. There's no question.
The politicians, the public officials, they've been saying things, but you think anything is getting done?
Well, what happens is that they're concerned with Long Island as a whole, because it's not just a local issue, it's a whole Long Island issue. And they're making some headway in terms of up island, as you would say. And they're asking these pilots to fly out over the water more, not over land, but they have to come into East Hampton, so they're back over land on our end. So the East End isn't benefiting from any of that. So we're not seeing the relief that they might be seeing some in the rest of the island, but out here we're not seeing it. And so far this year, I don't see any indication of any relief. They're not flying the altitudes. They're very low. I call in every day. I make my calls to 537 loud. And we just got to keep making noise about it. I don't know how far we'll get, but I think we need a broad public-based support to get this thing moving. I don't think anything's going to happen otherwise.
Leah, how does the noise from the helicopters affect you?
Yes, on the weekend, Friday evening, it's quite loud right over my area in Noyak. I live in Wickatuck Hills, and I do hear the noise there, and it's very loud and very annoying at times.
When you first came to live here on the east end of Long Island, did the problem exist?
No, it didn't exist at all then. No, it's only in the last few years that I've really been aware of it.
Has it gotten worse then year by year?
Yes, it certainly has, Carl. Yes.
Now, what about this year? Is it any better than it was last year?
No, it certainly isn't better.
Well, what about this claim that the public officials have been making that they developed an understanding with the helicopter pilots that they'd fly higher, and does it seem to be working out?
Well, if they have an understanding, it's not my understanding. I'm outside of that understanding. I don't know why it isn't better.
I think it's important that we all recognize, because you do know it is in your backyards and it is over your heads, that these helicopters are unregulated. It's obvious. And what's happening is it is affecting us more and more so. It's really indicative of some of the new transportation patterns that are emerging given the constraints of the road system. Many people are jet setting in, and they're not using jets, they're using helicopters. And they're going into East Hampton. So this is really a problem that is regional. It is intergovernmental. It's not just the town of Southampton and East Hampton. It is something that we very much will need to rely on higher powers that be. People like Chuck Schumer, who's been stepping up. People like Congressman Bishop, who've been stepping up. A lot of the role that your town government plays is advocacy. We're going to support legislation. We're going to write letters in support, resolutions of support. We're going to attend press conferences. And Nancy Grabowski has actually taken the lead on this as a yeoman's job, going up island to meet Chuck Schumer and advocate on different types of ways to regulate helicopters and reduce the noise, require mitigation measures. So I defer to her largely. But there's not a lot a town government can do. You know, if you asked me about limiting the size of houses, how tall they might be, I have that zoning power. If you ask me about clear cutting, we could make a clear cutting ordinance. If you ask me about speed limits, we have those powers to lower speed limits. But when you're talking about regulating airspace and helicopter noise, it's an issue that transcends local government. We're going to have to be your advocate, and what I need you folks to do is keep it on the agenda. Because I can tell you, when I'm sitting at the town board table, as loud as Nancy is on many of these issues, and she has been, she brings it up, she details it, she lives east of the canal, she knows what you're living. The rest of the board is not understanding it as easily. And if there's not people bringing it up periodically, either at the podium or through your communications to make sure that we know it's in your top 5 issues, then it's out of mind. And I've seen that. I've seen that during the past administration, people yawning while she's talking, etc., because you have to live here to know it. I happen to live in Quogue. I don't live here. I live in Quogue near Grabeski Airport. We're experiencing some of the helicopters as well. Not to the extent that you are, though. Not to the extent that you are. And I know Tom Neely might have some additional information on it that he might share. But I really think the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and that if we can band together on this and advocate together, we're going to make a difference, and it's going to be through higher ups. We got to make sure that it's on their agenda. So you need it on your agenda. You need to make sure town government's aware of this concern, so we act as your advocate, and we need to bring it to the federal government's level for action, because otherwise I don't think the town of East Hampton's going to step up either to start regulating helicopters under what powers they might have under their master plan. It is revenue generation for them as well, and obviously with deficits and all that, they're going to be looking for revenue, and they're going to be looking to continue to have some kind of economic base at that airport. And I'm sure with helicopters coming in, there's other support services that go with some supporting those helicopters.
Excuse me, can I talk to you for a second?
Nobody.
I know, but I'm just doing a story about people taking the helicopter out to the Hamptons. Isn't it expensive? It's like $600-700 to get out here.
It is rather expensive, but we charter it. It's 4th of July weekend. We thought, what the hell?
Yep. Have you taken the helicopter here before?
I have taken it before, yes.
A lot of people on the ground are saying they're so noisy, they're a racket. What do you think about the poor people on the ground?
It is rather noisy, but it's also very convenient. So
Have you tried driving? I mean, not that that's convenient.
I usually drive all the time. This is just a treat once in a while.
How quick have you left from, where did you leave from?
34th Street on the east side, it took 40 minutes.
And you're going to go back to?
And I'm going to drive back.
And again, what was your price? What was the charge on the helicopter?
It was a charter for everyone. It came to about $600 a person.
That's a lot of money to come out.
Money.
Again, about the noise. If you lived like in the Hamptons or
I live near the airport, so I do hear the noise.
And what do you think of it?
It bothers me, but, you know, it is what it is.
Brundage, you're the airport manager here in East Hampton. The complaints about helicopter noise seem to be almost as raucous as the helicopter noise this year as last. Can anything be done about it?
Can anything be done about it? There are things that can be done, but it's really more up to the FAA than it is up to us. As the airport manager, I manage the facility here. When the helicopters leave this airport, they're in airspace that belongs to the FAA. I really have no control over them once they leave the ground. So it's more an FAA issue. We have voluntary measures that we urge the helicopters to utilize, and many of them do. Some don't. There's a variety of reasons for that, which maybe Matthew can help you with. But we're making efforts, and we're making progress, I think.
Matt O'Brien, you're the operations manager here at the airport?
Airport operations supervisor.
Okay. Talk about this issue of voluntary compliance, and just describe the situation that Mr. Brundage is outlining in terms of you having no control after these helicopters take off from here.
Yeah, I mean, basically, since our airport is an uncontrolled field, we have no control tower here. The airports are able to come in and leave as they please, 24 hours a day. It's a public use airport. So Jim and I basically just manage the operations on the ground, security and the leases and stuff around here. And, you know, we try to also do our community outreach by trying to help the people who think that there's a problem with noise here, which there is. I mean, every Friday night we have about 50 helicopters that come out here, and then Sunday night they leave. So you have a pretty constant march of aircraft coming in and out of here each week.
Now, a key issue has to do with altitude. And the helicopter pilots this winter, or these representatives of the helicopter pilots this winter, agreed to fly at, I think they're talking 2,500, 3,000 feet in altitude. But, I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case in many of these, I mean, you just look up in the sky in Noyak or in Sag Harbor, a lot of areas around here, you look up and the helicopters, they're not treetop, but they're maybe 1,000 feet.
Yeah. It's very hard to determine what altitude an aircraft is at, because you have no reference plane behind that. What I've found in my compliance reports is that some of the people are really flying at 2,500. Some people fly at 5 miles out. We see them at 3,800 feet, you know. But it looks to me that they're trying to trying to help out and trying to do the procedures. But since they are voluntary, it's hard to enforce those procedures that are done here.
This whole notion of an uncontrolled airport, I mean, to most viewers, they have to wonder. They've been on airplanes and the pilot is in contact with control tower. I mean, how does this work, an uncontrolled airport?
There's a set of procedures that allows for that. In fact, years ago, many airports were uncontrolled, and over the years, more and more airports got control towers. This airport does not yet have a control tower. We don't have the amount of traffic that warrants a control tower in the eyes of the FAA. They wouldn't want to finance a control tower here because we only get 30,000 operations a year, which is about 15,000 aircraft. So that's not enough traffic to finance a control tower. And there are many airports in the country that are like that. So there's a set of procedures that pilots know how to get in and out of an airport safely. It's a protocol that they use, and it's used here. However, because of that, we don't have we certainly don't have control of the airplanes coming in and out. They're on their own. They sequence their arrivals and departures among each other on the radio.
So how can you do anything about helicopter noise if this is the Wild West of in the east of Long Island of air traffic? I mean, you're not in contact with these helicopter pilots or any pilots as they land or when they take off. I mean, how can you function here in terms of providing discipline to what is occurring?
Well, the answer to that is you can't. So I've been suggesting to the town of East Hampton that they should investigate having a seasonal control tower installed here to operate between the months of May and October, for example, when we get most of our traffic. And that can be done, even though the FAA won't fund it. It can be done privately. The town can outsource that function with private funds that the airport makes a lot of revenue, and there is revenue for this. And there are companies that provide this service. And the companies that do provide this service have FAA certified air traffic controllers that they provide. Now, you don't have to have a tower like people think of at Kennedy or some other airport where there's a big tower with a cab on top. They will actually come in here with a tractor trailer and set up shop. It's a temporary situation. All the town would have to provide is maybe a slab of concrete with electrical power, and they do all the rest.
Now, if you had such an operation here, could they then, in communication with incoming helicopters or outgoing helicopters, say, do this, do that, fly here, fly there?
Exactly. If we had a control tower here, this airport would now not be uncontrolled. It would be in what they call a control zone. And that control zone would extend 5 miles out in a radius, 5 miles from the airport, in a circle around the airport, so 10 miles wide, up to 2,500 feet. And any traffic coming into that control zone would then be controlled by this air traffic control tower, and there would be much more control in terms of complying with routes that they approach the airport from and depart, and altitudes that they come in here. And yes, we would have much more control with a tower.
And what's the status of getting such an installation here?
Quite frankly, I've brought it to the attention of the town board, and they're folding it into the decision-making process of the master plan. I'm getting kind of frustrated that they're not passing a resolution for me to go out and get bids to bring a control tower in here. I think they should do that. I don't think it should be part of the master plan. It's something that's a safety device that should be implemented as soon as possible.
Now, in terms of control tower, I was over at Gabreski Airport speaking to Tony Siglio, and they have a tower, but he says that even with the tower, there's only 70% compliance among the helicopters, that even though they've set up a northern route for the helicopters to fly in and out on, about 30% at least fly a southern route. What?
And Jim can tag on to this, but that tower, I think, is funded by the National Guard, if I'm correct. And
that's an Air Force tower.
Yeah. So that tower isn't really, it's not even really put in place for any sort of noise abatement tactic or anything else. So those controllers are really working for the National Guard for the most part. if you put a control tower into this town, the town would be the people who would be paying those controllers, and they would probably have to have a couple conversations before that tower went in place. And I'm sure they would be able to come to agreements on certain days of the week or certain times of the day using different routes that would come in and out of here at certain altitudes, or they wouldn't be hired. You know, that's basically how it would go.
Matthew hit the nail on the head. Their allegiance is not to the general aviation population over there. Their allegiance is to the Air National Guard. And Tony, quite frankly, says to me he doesn't get much cooperation from them. That wouldn't be the case here. If we had a control tower here that we hired through a outsourced company, their allegiance would be to the town of East Hampton. If the community would also let the town board know that they're interested in that as well, instead of just me being one voice up there, you know, begging them to act on this issue, maybe they would act on it better. And so I would like the community to get more involved in urging the town board to act sooner on this.
Matt, when you get a complaint, and there's a hotline number, what is the hotline number?
It's 631-537-LOUD.
I'd like to point out, though, that complaint line is put in for the benefit of the town of East Hampton residents and the town of Southampton residents. Unfortunately, that number got out to up the island, and we've been getting a lot of calls from up the island, and that's not the purpose of it. It's funded for local residents.
Well, I think you bring up an important point, though, because this activity, these frankly well-heeled people who come to the Hamptons on helicopters on weekends, not only cause a racket here in Southampton and East Hampton towns, but I mean in Smithtown and Huntington. I mean it's like it's an island-wide, it's a regional problem, the helicopter.
That's the Schumer initiative. That's the initiative that Senator Schumer and Congressman Tim Bishop got a hold of and are trying to correct.
Incidentally, the fare is not low to go from New York here to East Hampton Airport on a helicopter and back. One way, a helicopter load goes for $6,000 to $7,000. That's $800 per passenger one way. It's a great way to beat the Long Island Expressway, but sure is expensive and sure has an impact on people on the ground. The summer has arrived, and so have the helicopters, and people tell me they're as noisy as ever.
Actually, there's been some improvement. From what we're hearing from people calling into our office, I was just with the supervisor of Shelter Island, who told me that his experience and what he's hearing from his residents has been some improvement. I'm not going to suggest that it's perfect. It isn't, and we have a long way to go, but we are having some response on the part of the helicopter pilots to the voluntary routes that we've put in place and the voluntary minimum height, minimum altitude. But compliance there's still a ways to go. I mean, when we looked at this right after Memorial Day weekend, compliance with the routes was at about 60%, and compliance with the altitude was at about 50%. I felt that was unacceptable. Made that position clear to the Helicopter Pilots Association. Last weekend we monitored it. Compliance with the routes was at about 90%. The altitude, it was about 65%. So we're on the right trajectory, and we're gonna take another measurement point right after 4th of July weekend and see where we are.
If voluntary restrictions don't hold, what can you do about this?
Well, I have language in the FAA reauthorization bill that would require the FAA to conduct a study of helicopter noise on Long Island and to suggest noise mitigation strategies. That is the first step in getting to the point where the FAA would be required to regulate helicopter traffic. So right now, current law does not allow for the FAA to regulate helicopter traffic, and the Helicopter Pilots Association, understandably, don't want regulation. The point that I've made to them is show us you don't need it. If you don't want regulation, show us that you're capable of regulating yourselves. Show us that you're willing to comply with these voluntary restrictions. And so what I'm going to do is just monitor performance, and if it's necessary to push for a regulation, then that's what I'm going to do.